Now that we have all the injury news, it's about time to go through and look at these updated projections and maybe find some of those underdog pickems that I am very excited about. We're going to go game by game, try to figure out who we should be starting, who should we be sitting based off underdog pickems, the best way to look at projections, because if you disagree, you could always take a side, but I'll tell you one thing, underdog probably knows more than what you do. And going over to Lamar, obviously we're starting him no matter what. Honestly, wouldn't even mind the 1.5x multiplier for him to score a touchdown this week. I mean, they have him for 21 fantasy points. I still view him as an elite level QB on a week-to-week perspective. Looking at Edwards, only at 41.5 rushing yards. Keep in mind, this is going to be a player that doesn't really get involved as a receiver either, so not too excited. Andrews, 51.5 receiving yards. I actually wouldn't mind buying Andrews if you could sell Laporta for him. Zay Flowers coming off game where he had 11 targets at 59.5 total yards. I view Flowers as a must-start player. Odell and Rashad Bateman are players that are cuttable for you at this point. You see Bateman actually lower than Nelson Aguilar with their pick'em yards. Would not mind at all if you just wanted to straight up move on from Rashad Bateman. And then Justice Hill as well. He's at 39.5 for his total yards. Ultimately, we talk about this with a lot of different running backs. This is why we were saying to sell Jerome Ford back when he had the 2 touchdowns against Tennessee, is because if you are going to be looking at untalented running backs, they can be productive in fantasy if they go out there and if they have every single touch in their backfield. But nonetheless, you're going to be looking at Derrick Henry here with 11.85 fantasy points at 80 total yards. Still have to start him even if you are worried about the matchup. Tajee Spears at 46.5 total yards. Still more so just a premium handcuff running back. If you were to have Henry go down, then he's exciting. You have DeAndre Hopkins at 59.5 receiving yards. You have no Treylon Burks in this game, so I think Hopkins is someone that you want to play, someone that you probably view in the same range as Zay Flowers with no Treylon Burks. And then outside of that, obviously, the Tennessee Titans are just a very boring team where we don't want to be excited about too many of these guys. Geno should have a considerable amount of passing volume here. They have Geno for about 15.5 passing yards, obviously. I mean, you have all the receivers healthy in Seattle at the moment. You have Kenneth Walker at 81.5 total yards, must-start player. Zach Charbonnet, must-roster option, just considering the fact if you were to see that injury to Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet becomes a league winner. You have DK Metcalf at 62.5 receiving yards, 11.15 fantasy points. Tyler Lockett still at 51.5 receiving yards. Still going to be viewing him as that low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3, just based off target volume. You've actually had 27 targets for Tyler Lockett in this offense in comparison to DK Metcalf at 23 and Jackson Smith-Njigba at 20. Not going to be surprised if we see a JSN breakout game, but at the same time, we can't go through and start Jackson Smith-Njigba until we actually see him out there producing. And then Noah Fant, not interesting. Even though it's funny, Noah Fant has more receiving yards than Tyler Lockett at this point. Now, Joe Burrow, you'll see that you actually have him at half a passing yard for this week. Now, that's going to be the Underdog promo. Only new people to Underdog are going to get that. And, of course, if you're not on Underdog already, promo code FLOCK, get the Joe Burrow half a total yard mark. And on top of that, when you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 100% deposit match, our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And now is by far and away the best time to use promo code FLOCK and sign up for Underdog. Because not only are you going to be getting that Joe Burrow special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard, but also you'd be getting a Justin Herbert special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard this week for the Monday night, because it was our birthday this week. So Underdog's hooking y'all up. Super happy I'm able to get y'all all of that. So please make sure you take advantage. But going over with Burrow, 277.5 passing yards. Hard to say that Burrow is 100% the player that he was before the injury, right? I don't think Burrow's at 100% just yet. Someone that we can start based off how he looked last week. You're more so excited about him after the bye. Looking at Joe Mixon getting involved as a receiver. They have him at 22.5 receiving yards, almost 90 total yards. Mixon must start option. Chase must start option. T. Higgins, I mean, looks like he may play as a game time decision. Do not start T. Higgins. I really hope he has a good game. I mean, he's a buy low guy for us in the long term. But ultimately, I mean, we can't start a banged up T. Higgins with the banged up Joe Burrow going into a bye week where they are inclined to just make sure Higgins waits and instead looks 100% after the bye. Now, going over to San Fran, one of these pick'ems I actually will like a considerable amount here. And this is a player that we've been saying to sell high because, I mean, I'm seeing some people out in the live stream go out and like trade him for CeeDee Lamb. Right now, you actually have Deebo Samuel at 56.5 total yards. However, you have Brandon Ayuk only at 48.5 total yards. So while I do stand by, I think that Ayuk is an intriguing sell-high candidate in fantasy, because what I've found in your regular redraft leagues, people are valuing Brandon Ayuk way higher than this. His underdog Pickems of more than 48.5 receiving yards and a 1.75x multiplier for him to score a touchdown would be interesting. However, I do want to put an asterisk. You're going to have to monitor the Cleveland weather here. The Cleveland weather may be bad, so I don't want to be going out there and taking that pick'em today. But if tomorrow morning it looks to be fine in Cleveland, I would be interested in that. Now, going over to Cleveland, nobody's interesting. PJ Walker, they only have at, 183 total yards. They have Jerome Ford at 7.5 fantasy points. And yes, as we said, Jerome Ford, I'm back 2 weeks ago. We were saying to sell him high, and the reason is he's not a talented running back, and he's in a 3-man running back by committee. You can be an untalented running back, and of course, untalented is harsh because he's more talented at the game of football than I am talented at anything in my entire life. But compared to other running backs in the NFL, you could be someone that maybe is not a top-end talent and still be hyper-productive in fantasy if you're getting 100% of the work, right? If you're Kyron Williams getting everything in his backfield, fire above. But there, I don't think you can be too excited about someone like Ford. Now, going over to Carolina, you have Bryce Young, someone not too interesting. Bryce Young has been bad so far. You have Chuba Hubbard right now at 64.5 total yards. Wouldn't mind if you wanted to go and take the more than 60.5 total yards on Chuba Hubbard. But personally, I think that I'm probably going to be fading this offense. You have them as 14-point dogs against the Miami Dolphins, one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And I wouldn't mind going through and saying Adam Thielen's going to have fewer than 60 receiving yards. Like, you could go through and say Brandon Ayuk for more than 48, Adam Thielen for more than 60, and kind of play the middle game between those two players. Because I honestly wouldn't vault you at all if you want to start Brandon Ayuk over Adam Thielen this week, depending on the weather. But going over to Miami, looking at Mostert, they have him at 92.5 total yards. For the love of God, make sure you are starting Raheem Mostert. You have no Devon Achane, and at the same time, you have no Jeff Wilson Jr. in this game. Tyreek Hill at 90 total yards. We know you start Tyreek. You have Jalen Waddle at 60 receiving yards. Yes, Waddle's still a must-start wide receiver. Please do not worry about it. Waddle is someone that needs to be in your starting lineup. Now, moving down, Sam Howell is someone that's going to be interesting to look at. And that if you are looking at Sam Howell, this is a quarterback that's been getting there off garbage time, but obviously that's very hard to project out. They're 2.5-point dogs against the Atlanta Falcons. Sam Howell has 16 fantasy points for his more than less than. Going over to Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson, 2 weeks back was our hit. Last Thursday, we heavily went in on Brian Robinson, down more than 6.5 receiving yards against Chicago. Here he's at 8.5 receiving yards, 72.5 total yards. I think this is someone you probably play, but at the same time, I don't necessarily know if this is a pick'em that we are in love with. Terry McLaurin, I'm going to be looking at the fewer than 53.5 total yards. I think Atlanta slows the pace of play down. I don't necessarily think that you're in a spot to see a tremendous amount of volume. And the reason why you actually really want to include this Terry McLaurin pick'em is this is a boosted pick'em for this week. Underdog's hooking y'all up with. So typically if you include, say, 2 pick'ems together, then it's going to be a 3x multiplier. But I believe if you include 2 pick'ems with the Terry McLaurin one, then it's maybe going to be a 5-6x multiplier. I don't remember. Just look at it yourself, and I promise you will want to include that. You can go higher, you can go lower. I'm going on the lower side, and then 53.5 total yards. Don't start Curtis Samuel. Don't start Jahan Dotson. Don't get suckered in. Now, if you want to start Logan Thomas, you can go ahead and do it. He has a 2x multiplier for him to score a touchdown as well. Now, going over to Bijan, hook 'em horns. You know we got to go with our guy, more than 97.5 total yards. He has been averaging over 100 total yards per game. You have Drake London only at 3.5 receptions. Drake London is someone that you do not want to be starting, ladies and gentlemen. You have Kyle Pitts at 32.5 receiving yards. You can start Kyle Pitts, but obviously, just tight ends are significantly worse than receivers in general, so the bar to get in there is going to be lowered. Now, going over to Minnesota, you have Akers currently at 33.5 total yards for his pick'em. You have Alexander Madison currently at 71.5. I think that this is a running back by committee where neither guy is really startable. You want to be rostering both players because if you were to have an injury to one or the other, then the other guy ends up becoming a must-start player each and every week. Jordan Addison at about 51.5 total yards. I think you definitely start Addison for the upside. Going over to Chicago, you have Justin Fields with a 1.5x multiplier for him to score 2 or more passing touchdowns, I honestly think that's a sucker's pick 'em. I would be looking to avoid that in general. I mean, I think that honestly, Justin Fields could go out there and have a good game and still only have 1 passing touchdown. Please do not be looking at that. You have Deonta Foreman at 59.5 total yards. I do want to point out this is going to be lower than what you saw with Chuba Hubbard, just in case if you're wondering, do I go Hubbard, do I go Foreman? You have DJ Moore at 60.5 total yards. So earlier in the week, I was actually saying DJ Moore was a very interesting pick 'em to take when he was at 55.5 receiving yards. But it looks like too many of us went and took the higher than, and it looks like they possibly moved that up to 60.5. So I think it's a fair mark. I probably look to stay away there. And then Cole Kmet's a similar range to what you have with someone like Kyle Pitts. Going over to Indy with Gardner Minshew, not too interesting. You're not starting him. Now, you have right now Jonathan Taylor at 45.5 rushing yards. You have Zach Moss at the same. So you have Underdog projecting this out to be a 50-50 running back split between Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. Obviously, a big difference compared to what we saw last week. Now, if you look at my flex rankings, I currently have both running backs as starts. I am hesitant on both guys. We have Jonathan Taylor at 47 in our flex rankings, and we have Zach Moss at 51. So we have JT about 4 slots higher than Zach Moss. I just personally think that they paid Jonathan Taylor $40 million. They're probably going to be involving Jonathan Taylor. Now, Josh Downs, 44.5 receiving yards, honestly seems a little bit high, but obviously he has been better in games where Gardner Minshew's played. Now, going over to Jacksonville, you're looking at Travis Etienne, 96.5 total yards. I mean, a buy low candidate for us all season. You know, we've been crushing on Travis Etienne. Going over to Calvin Ridley, they have Ridley at 61.5 receiving yards. And they have Christian Kirk actually as the wide receiver 1 at 62.5. I wouldn't mind going with the fewer than 62.5 receiving yards for Christian Kirk this week, even if he's definitely been better than we are expecting. Going over to New Orleans, I mean, you have Olave. Okay, this is actually, you have Alvin Kamara at over 100 total yards, which seems ridiculous to me, but Alvin Kamara, a must-start guy. Looking at Olave, the reason we have that higher than highlighted is make sure you're including the Olave 55 total yards, whether you want to go higher or lower than in your special pick'em, because Underdog's going to be giving away $100,000 this Sunday to people who do include that pick'em in their pick'em slip. And we had a few members of the flock actually win $10,000 earlier this season from going through and entering into that giveaway. So please make sure y'all do not forget that. Now going over to Stroud, nothing too interesting. You have Dameon Pierce currently at 64.5 total yards, about the same range like Deonta Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, right? You have Nico Collins. This is one if you wanted to include like a 2x multiplier. So if y'all know how Underdog works, so you go through and you create your pick'em slip. Once you get up to 3 options, then I believe it's maybe an 8x multiplier. But if one of those 3 options would be Nico Collins and you do the higher than half a touchdown, so essentially Nico Collins scored a touchdown, whatever the natural multiplier of that pick'em slip would be, it doubles it. So if you're going for a long shot, my long shot is going to be Nico Collins to score a touchdown. You have no Tank Dell this week, and Nico Collins has been seeing a considerable amount of volume. Now, going over to what we have in New England, nobody's startable. You have Ramondre Stevenson at 69.5 total yards, so I guess you put him in there over guys like Deonta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard, but it is what it is. He's an inefficient running back and a horrendous offense in a committee. Josh Jacobs at 95.5 total yards. You start him. He's at 3.5 receptions. Devontae Adams only 73.5 receiving yards. It's actually very surprising. It's one of the lower pick'ems that I've ever seen on Devontae Adams. Now keep in mind, it isn't the easiest matchup in the world. Okay. Now Swift, must-start guy. Jalen Hurts, must-start guy. I mean, actually, if I want to point this out, I don't mind going with the Jalen Hurts to score a rushing touchdown pick'em. I mean, just given the push play and what we've seen from Jalen Hurts, not only this season and last season, but more times than not, Jalen Hurts is scoring a rushing touchdown. Like if we're just going to go ahead and pull up what we've had so far this season. Jalen Hurts in 5 games. I don't want to just look at his total rushing touchdown mark because obviously if you score multiple in one game, it's going to skew things. But nonetheless, in those 5 games, he scored a touchdown, a rushing touchdown, that is, in 3 of the 5. Devonta Smith still starting. Dallas Goedert still starting at tight ends. Hopefully we get another Dallas Goedert touchdown. Now, Breece Hall, running back that we said a buy low on last week, 72.5 total yards, still starting him against Philly. Just please lower your expectations. It's going to be a significantly worse matchup here against the Philadelphia Eagles than it was against the Broncos. Going over to Arizona, Hollywood Brown questionable with an illness. If Hollywood plays, you probably play Hollywood as that low-end wide receiver too based off volume. Zach Ertz still in like the Kyle Pitts range. Now, if you look at the running backs here, I mean, Underdog has them pretty damn low, right? I mean, you have DeMercado there at 37.5 rushing yards. I have no idea what the running back usage is going to be here in Arizona. So I'm going to personally avoid all the running backs here. And once we see the usage, then maybe we decide to start them the next week. Now, Matthew Stafford, you can actually start him as a sneaky play given the implied team total that you have for this offense. Kyren Williams at 87.5 total yards. You start Kyren Williams. Cooper Kupp at 90.5 total yards. You start Cooper Kupp. Puka at 64.5 receiving yards. You start Puka. I don't know if we're reinventing the wheel here by any means. Now, going over and looking at Detroit, you have Montgomery at 95.5 total yards. Obviously, you are going through and you are starting David Montgomery. You have St. Brown at 70.5 receiving yards. You start Amon-Ra St. Brown as well. I don't know why we are even wasting time. Rachaad White, I know a lot of people are concerned with. The man still has an incredible workload, especially as a receiver. I mean, his his high or lower is going to be 3 receptions this week. So I think you're going to want to go ahead and start Rachaad White. Those Pickems I'm probably staying away from. However, if you want another long shot Pickem, I actually don't mind Chris Godwin with the 2x multiplier for him to score a touchdown this week. Obviously, if it was even odds, we're not doing it with Chris Godwin. I'm sorry, especially with Mike Evans back. But if you're getting the 2x multiplier, I think it's interesting. Nobody with the Giants is interesting. For the love of God, do not start a New York Giant. Going over to Buffalo, James Cook is someone that I know a lot of people have questions about. He's at 79.5 total yards. I mean, if you are looking at James Cook, this is going to be a running back that ultimately, at the end of the day, is going to be in a game where they're favored by 14 points. So you want to go ahead, you want to start James Cook. I mean, even if the usage has been trending in the wrong way, and even if you are a little bit concerned there. Now, going over to what we have in the Monday night game, you have Tony Pollard, 67.5 total yards, more than less than half a touchdown. So expectation is Pollard may score a touchdown. Still start Pollard, still start Lamb. Don't overthink it. Stay away from the 2x multiplier, Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup touchdowns, which are going to be sucker pick'ems. Then going over to the Los Angeles Chargers, Austin Eckler will be back this week. Eckler right now sitting at about 50 rushing yards, about 33.5 receiving yards. So if you had a total yardage pick him, it would be in the 90s. I know it doesn't add up one for one. I understand, but still. And then Keenan Allen, 80 receiving yards. These are guys that are must-start options. Really don't want to go for Joshua Palmer because I think Johnston may expand his role. And then I want to remind y'all, please make sure you are taking that Justin Herbert special pick'em. More than less than half a total yard. That is only going to be available if you used promo code FLOCK on Underdog. But it doesn't matter if you used promo code FLOCK 2 years ago, last year, today, tomorrow. If you use code FLOCK, you will get the Justin Herbert special pick'em. So please make sure you are taking advantage. Underdog's getting y'all that because it was our birthday this week. And also, ladies and gentlemen, if you're new to Underdog, promo code FLOCK will get you on top of that a Joe Burrow special pick of more than less than half a total yard for tomorrow as well. Best time to get on Underdog. Super happy we're able to get you all that since it was our birthday. Also, code FLOCK will get you a 100% deposit match, and it will also get you our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. So please make sure you're taking advantage. But I think that should be it for this live stream. I'm going to go walk the dog, and they'll be live again answering fantasy football questions. So please, if you have not done so already, drop that like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. I really do appreciate you, and I'll see you out in the live stream in probably about an hour, hour and a half.